Hey guys. All right, let's see if this works. Mm-mm. Hi. And let me see if I can tag Masha. Hi everyone. I'm gonna just wait a couple minutes to see if anyone else joins. Hello. And my tea. How's everyone doing tonight? Cozy corner here in my room. Well, my studio apartment, rather. My bed is like 7 feet away. Just gonna give it a couple more minutes. Okay, and some background when everyone is waiting for me to start. And again, forgive me if I have terrible pronunciation issues. I'm a little nervous. I've never done a live stream read before, but this was actually one of the first philosophical texts I ever read, and I read it in part of my religious studies background. So you know that thing that happens when you read so much about something, but you never actually read it? We'll talk about it with someone else, like human. So you mispronounce everything. So Boethius, um, this text is actually a cornerstone of medieval humanist thought, and it's just gorgeous. The prose is amazing. So essentially, this is during a time of imprisonment for him, and his own martyrdom. And what he's doing is he writes a letter to all of the cornerstones of scholasticism, the concepts of them, as women coming to him in prison. And it's really beautiful. Hi, everyone. Okay, so Nestor is here. Thank you, Masha. So these are my devil's ivy. This one's actually about 7 foot long. That's my money tree, and then cacti, and I have no idea what this one is. So, Boethius. Thank you. Boethius. Awesome. You did me a solid. And I'm Jewish. I'm reclaiming this. Okay. So each book is presented as a personal treatise, essentially, and as a series of poems and prose mixed in with one another. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with book one. Let's get cozy here. I really need to wash my glasses. And L'chaim. Poem one, book one. I who once wrote songs with keen delight and am now by sorrow driven to take up melancholy measures. Wounded muses tell me what I must write. Elegiac verses bathe my face with real tears. Not even terror could drive me from these faithful companions of my long journey. Poetry, which was once the glory of my happy and flourishing youth, is still my comfort in this misery of my old age. Old age has come too soon with its evils, and sorrow has commanded me to enter the age which is hers. My hair is prematurely gray, and slack skin shakes on my exhausted body. Death, happy to men when she does not intrude in the sweet years, that comes when often in sorrow, turns a deaf ear to the wretched and cruelly refuses those weeping eyes. The sad hour that has nearly drowned me came just at the time that faithless fortune favored me with her worthless gifts. 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 I have a lisp, sorry. Now that she has clouded her deceitful face, my accursed life seems to go on endlessly. My friends, Why did you so often think me happy? Any man who has fallen has never stood securely. That's a mood. Okay. Prose 1, Book 1. Lady Philosophy appears to him and drives away the muses of poetry. While I silently pondered these things and decided to write down my wretched complaint, there appeared standing above me a woman of majestic countenance whose flashing eye seemed wise beyond the ordinary wisdom of men. Her color was bright, suggesting boundless vigor, and yet she seemed so old that she could not be thought of as belonging to our age. Her height seemed to vary. Sometimes she seemed of ordinary human stature. Then her head seemed to touch the top of the heavens. And when she raised herself to her full height, she penetrated heaven itself, beyond the vision of human eyes. Her clothing was made of the most delicate threads, and by the most exquisite workmanship. It had, as she afterwards told me, had been woven by her own hands into an everlasting fabric. Her clothes have been darkened in color somewhat by neglect in the passage of time, as happens to pictures exposed to smoke. At the lower edge of her robe was woven a Greek 2. At the top of the letter theta, and between them were clearly marked stages, like stairs, ascending from the lowest to the highest. This robe had been torn, however, by the hands of violent men, who had ripped away what they could. In her right hand, the woman held certain books, in her left hand, a scepter. When she saw the muses of poetry standing beside me and consoling me with their words, she was momentarily upset and glared at them with burning eyes. Who let this Who let these whores from the theater come to the bedside of this sick man? She said. They cannot offer medicine for his sorrows, they will nourish him only with their sweet poison. They kill the fruitful harvest of reason with the sterile thorns of passions. They do not liberate the minds of men from disease, but merely accustom them to it. I would find it easier to bear if your flattery had, as it usually does, seduced some ordinary dull-witted man. In that case, it would have been no concern of mine. But this man has been educated in the philosophical schools of the ecclesiastics. Sorry. And the academy. Get out, you sirens. Your sweetness leads to death. Leave him to be cured and made strong by my muses. And so the defeated muses, shamefaced and with downcast eyes, went sadly away. My sight was so dimmed by tears that I could not tell who this woman of imperious authority might be, and I lay there astonished, my eyes staring at the earth, silently waiting to see what she would do. She came near and sat down at the foot of my bed. When she noticed my grief-stricken, downcast face, she reproved my anxiety with this song. Alas, how this mind is dulled. Poem 2, Book 2. Alas, how this mind is dulled, drowned in the overwhelming depths. It wanders in outer darkness, deprived of its natural light. Sick anxiety, inflated by worldly winds, swells his thoughts to bursting. Once this man was free beneath the open heaven, and he used to run along heavenly paths. He saw the splendor of the red sun, the heaven of the cold moon, and any star that pursued its vagrant paths, returning through various spheres, this master understood by his companions. Beyond all this, he sought causes of things, why the sighing winds vex the sea waves, what spirit turns the stable world, and why the sun rises out of the red east to fall beneath the western ocean. He sought to know what tempers the gentle hours of spring and makes them adorn the earth with rosy flowers, what causes fertile autumn to flow with bursting grapes in a good year. This man used to explore and revel in nature's secret causes. Now he lies here, bound by his heavy chains, the light of his mind gone out, his head bowed down, and he is forced to stare at the dull earth. Yeah. Prose 2, Book 2. Seeing his desperate condition, philosophy speaks more gently and promises to cure him. But, she said, it is time for medicine rather than complaint. Fixing me with her eyes, she said, are you not he who was once nourished by my milk and brought up on my food, who emerged from weakness to the strength of a virile soul? I gave you weapons that would have protected you with invincible power. If you had not thrown them away, don't you recognize me? Why don't you speak? Is it shame or astonishment that makes you silent? I'd rather it were shame, but I can see you're overcome by shock. When she saw that I was not only silent but struck dumb, she gently laid her hand on my breast and said, there is no danger. You are suffering merely from lethargy, the common illness of deceived minds. You have forgotten yourself a little, but you will quickly be yourself again when you recognize me. To bring you to your senses, I shall quickly wipe the dark cloud of mortal things from your eyes. Then she dried my tear-filled eyes with a fold of her robe. Poem 3, Book 1. Then, when the night was over, darkness left me and my eyes regained their former strength, just as when the stars are covered by the swift chorus, and the sky is darkened by storm clouds. The sun hides and the stars do not shine. Night comes down to envelop the earth. But if Boreas, blowing from his Thracian cave, beats and lays open the hiding day, then Phoebus shines forth, glittering with sudden light, and strikes our astonished eyes with his rays. Oh, sorry. Oh, people. Oh, people are commenting. Oh, this makes me so happy that you love it. Um, I was just, oh, Masha, I'm taking a break. I'm pausing before I get Prose 3. So, I was only planning on reading book 1 and 2, but if you guys really, really like it, I will go ahead and read the whole thing. It's not that big, but I'll split it into next week and I'll push off the phenomenology of spirit a little bit. The next one after this was going to be Confessions, but I'm so glad you like it. It is sublime. It is true beauty. This is a man on his deathbed looking into the eyes of his terminal state and reckoning with all that is beautiful in the world. And I just, yeah, one more sip of beer and then I'll get back to Prose 3. And let me know if I need to adjust the volume or if you can't hear me. My heater just went on. So, okay. Let me bring you guys forward a bit. There we go. Prose 3, Book 3. Boethius. Yeah, Boethius. Thank you. I can't believe I've read this for years and still didn't know how to pronounce his name. Internet. Boethius recognizes Lady Philosophy. She promises to help him as she has always helped those who love and serve her. What a fitting thing for the first dream in this group. In a similar way, I too was able to see the heavens again when the clouds of my sorrow were swept away. I recovered my judgment and recognized the face of my physician. When I looked at her closely, I saw that she was Philosophy, my nurse, in whose house I had lived for my youth. Mistress of all virtues, I said, why have you come, leaving the ark of heaven, to this lonely desert of our exile? Are you a prisoner too, charged as I am with false accusations? She answered, how could I desert my child and not share with you the burden of sorrow that you carry, a burden caused by hatred of my name? Philosophy has never thought it right to leave the innocent man alone on his journey. Should I fear to face my accusers as though their enmity were something new? Do you suppose that this is the first time wisdom has been attacked and endangered by wicked men? We fought against such rashness and folly long ago, even before the time of our disciple Plato. And in Plato's own time, his master Socrates, with my help, merited the victory of an unjust death. Afterwards, the inept schools of the Epicureans, Stoics, and others, each seeking its own interest, tried to steal the inheritance of Socrates and to possess me, in spite of my protests and struggles, as though I were the spoils of their quarreling. They tore this robe which I had woven with my own hands, and having ripped some little pieces of it, went away, supposing that they possessed me wholly. Then, when traces of my garments were seen on some of them, they were rashly thought to be my friends, and they were therefore condemned by the error of the profane mob, or the mob of profanity, depends on your translation. Perhaps you have not heard of the banishment of Anaxagoras, the poisoning of Socrates, the torments of Zeno, for these strange men were strange to you, but you probably know about Canius, Seneca, and Soranus, for their fame is recent and widely known. They were disgraced only because they had been trained in my studies and therefore seemed obnoxious to wicked men. You should not be surprised, then, if we are blown about by stormy winds in this voyage of life, since our main duty is to oppose the wicked. But even though our enemies are numerous, we should spurn them, because they are without leadership and are driven frantically that way and this way by error. And if they sometimes attack us with extraordinary force, our leader withdraws her followers into a fortress, leaving our enemies to waste their energies on worthless spoils. While they fight over things of no value, we laugh at them from above, safe from their fury and defended by strength against which their aggressive folly cannot prevail. That's a very big Philbook mood right there. I wonder if Lady Philosophy would be follow Zizek, however he's pronounced. I think she's more of a Hegelian, personally. Okay. Poem 4, Book 1. The serene man who has ordered his life stands above menacing fate and unflinchingly faces good and bad fortune. This virtuous man can hold up his head unconquered. The threatening and raging ocean storms which churn the waves cannot shake him, nor can the bursting furnace of Vesuvius aimlessly throwing out its smoky figure, nor the fiery bolts of lightning which can topple the highest towers. Why then are we wretched, frightened by fierce tyrants who rage without the power to harm us? He who hopes for nothing and fears nothing can disarm the fury of these impotent men. But he who is burdened by fears and desires is not the master of himself. He throws away his shield and retreats. He fastens the chain by which he will be drawn. Prose 4, Book 1. Boethius gives an account of his public career and especially the causes of his present misery. Okay. Do you understand what I have told you? Philosophy asked. Have my words impressed you at all, or are you like the ass which cannot hear the lyre? Why are you crying? Speak out and don't hide what troubles you. If you want a doctor's help, you must uncover your wound. I pulled myself together and answered, do I have to explain? Isn't the misery of my misfortune evident enough? I should think this place alone would make you pity me. Compare this prison with my library at home, which you chose as your own, and which you often discussed with me the knowledge of both human and divine things. Did I look like this? Was I dressed this way when I studied nature's mysteries with you? When you mapped the courses of the stars for me with your geometer's rod? When you formed my moral standards, my whole view of life according to the norm of the heavenly order? Are these miseries the rewards your servants should expect? You yourself proposed the course I have followed when you made Plato say that civil governments would be good if wise men were appointed rulers, or if the appointed to rule would study wisdom. Further, you decreed in the words of the same philosopher that the government of the Commonwealth ought to be in the hands of wise men, that it should be left to unscrupulous and wicked men, they would bring about the ruin of the good. On this authority, I have decided to apply to public administration the principles I have learned privately from you, Lady Philosophy. You and God, who gave to you the minds of wise men, know that I become a magistrate only because of the unanimous wish of all good men. For these reasons, I have become involved in the grave and hopeless trouble with dishonest men, and, as always happens to the administrator of an independent and powerful conscience, I have had to be willing to make powerful enemies in the interest of safeguarding justice. I have often opposed the greed of Conisticus in his swindling of the poor. I have condemned the crimes of Troligula, of the provost of the king's house, both in their beginnings and after they had been committed. At grave risk to my position, I have protected the weak from the lies and avarice of cruel men in power. No man ever corrupted my administration of justice. I was just as depressed as those who suffer the losses of when I had seen the wealth of our citizens dissipated either by private fraud or oppressive taxation. At the time of the severe famine, when prices were set so exorbitantly high that the province of Campania seemed to starve, I carried on the people's fight against the Praetorian prefect himself, and with the king's approval, I won. The fixed prices were not enforced. I saved Paulinus, the former consul, from the howling dogs of the court who'd helped to devour his wealth. In order to save Albinus, another former consul, from unjust punishment, I risked the hatred of his accuser, Cyprian. One would think I had stirred up enough opposition, but I ought to have been defended by others, especially since, through devotion to justice, I had given up the favor of the courtiers, who might have saved me. But who were the accusers who overthrew me? One of them was Basil, who had earlier been expelled from the king's service and was now forced by his debts to testify against me. My other accusers were Apilio and, give me one moment, Gaudentius, also men banished by royal decree for their many corrupt practices. They tried to avoid exile by taking sanctuary, but when the king heard of it, he decreed that, if they did not leave Ravenna by a certain day, they should be branded on the forehead and enforcibly expelled. How could the king's judgment have been more severe? And yet on that very day their testimony against me was accepted. Why should this have happened? Did I deserve it? Did their criminal records make them just accusers? Fortune ought to have been shamed, if not by the innocence of the accused, and at least by the villainy of the accusers. Finally, what am I accused of? They say that I desired the safety of the Senate, but how? Am I convicted of having hindered their accuser from giving evidence that the Senate is guilty of treason? What is your judgment, my teacher? Shall I deny the charge in order to avoid shaming you? But did I desire to protect the Senate, and I always will. And how can I confess, since I've already stopped hindering their accuser? Shall I consider it a crime to have supported the integrity of the Senate? Is it true that the Senate itself, by its decrees against me, has made my position a crime? But folly, driven by self-deception, cannot change the merits of the case, nor, following the rule of Socrates, can I think it right either to hide the truth or to concede to a lie. I leave it to you and the judgment of the wise, whether my course of action is right. I have put this in writing so that posterity may know the truth and have a record of these events. Why should I even mention the spurious letters in which I am charged with having hoped for Roman liberty? That fraud would have been exposed had I been permitted to use the confession of my confusers. The confession of my accusers, the strongest evidence in any case. But there is now no hope for freedom of any kind. I only wish there were. I should have answered in the words of Cneius when Gaius Caesar, son of Germanicus, accused Cneius of having known of a conspiracy against him. If I had known of it, Cneius said, you would have never have known. But I am not so discouraged by what has happened to me that I complain now of the attacks of wicked men against virtue. The reason for my surprise is that they have accomplished what they have set out to do. The desire to do evil may be due to human weakness, for the wicked to overcome the innocent in the sight of God, that is monstrous. I cannot blame that friend of yours who said, if there is a God, why is there evil? And if there is no God, how can there be good? It is not surprising that evil men who want to destroy just men, and the Senate too, should try to overthrow one who stood up for justice in the Senate. But surely I did not deserve the same treatment from the senators themselves. Interesting. You remember well that you have always directed me in everything I said and everything I tried to do or tried to say. You recall, for example, the time at Verona when the king wanted to overturn the government and tried to absolve the whole Senate in the treason of which Albinus was accused. And then, at great risk to my personal safety, I defended the innocence of the whole Senate. You know that this is true, that I have never acted out of a desire for praise, for integrity of conscience, and is somehow spoiled when a man advertises what he has done and receives the reward of public recognition. But you see where my innocence has brought me, instead of being rewarded for true virtue, I am falsely punished as a criminal. Even the full confession of a crime does not usually make all of the judges in the case equally severe. Some, at least, temper their severity by recognizing the errors of human judgment, the uncertain conditions of fortune to which all mortals are suspect. If I had been accused of plotting the burning of the churches, the murder of the priests, and even the murder of all good men, even then I would have been sentenced only after I had confessed and been convicted, and when I was present before the court. But now, 500 miles away, mute and defenseless, I am condemned to proscription and death because of my concern for the safety of the Senate. The Senate deserves that no one should ever again be convicted of such a crime. Air quotes in this edition. And pause. So, Louise, or Lewis, whichever you prefer. The edition I'm reading is the Macmillan Library edition, published in 1962, with the notes and Mather, and I think this actual general translation by Richard Green. Okay. Oof. That's a lot. Boethius is a mouthful. Even my accusers understood the honor implicit in the charges they brought against me, and in order to confuse the issue in the appearance of some crime, they falsely alleged that I had corrupted my conscience with sacrilege out of desire for advancement. But your spirit, Lady Philosophy, alive within me, had driven from my soul all sordid desire for earthly success, and those for whom you protect do not commit sacrilege. You have daily reminded me of Pythagoras' saying, "Follow God." It is not likely that I have sought the protection of evil spirits at a time when you were forming in me that excellence which makes man like God. Moreover, the innocence of my family, the honesty of my closest friends, the goodness of my father-in-law, who is as worthy of honor as yourself, all these ought to have shielded me from any suspicion of this crime. But the worst is that my enemies readily believe that wisdom itself is capable of the crime of ambition, and so they associate me with such conduct because I am imbued with your knowledge and endowed with your virtues. So my reverence for you is no help. Their hatred to me leads them to dishonor you. Finally, and this is the last straw, definitely a 60s translation. Finally, and this is the last straw, the judgment of most peoples is based not on the merits of a case but on the fortune of its outcome. They think that only things which turn out happily are good. As a result, the first thing an unfortunate man loses is his good reputation. I cannot bear to think of the rumors and various opinions that are now going around. I can say only that the final misery of adverse fortune is that when some poor man is accused of a crime, it is thought that he deserves whatever punishment he has been offered by the court, whatever punishment he has to suffer. Well, here am I, stripped of my possessions and honors, my reputation ruined, punished because I tried to do good. It seems to me that I can see wicked men everywhere celebrating my fall with great pleasure, and all the criminally depraved concocting new false charges. I see good men terrorized into helplessness by my danger, and evil men encouraged to risk any crime with the impunity and able to get away with it by bribery. The innocent are deprived not only of their safety, but even of any defense. Now, hear my appeal. Poem 5, Book 1. Boethius concludes with a prayer. Oh gosh, this part just brings me to tears. Creator of the star-filled universe, see that upon your eternal throne, you move the heavens in their swift orbits. You hold the stars in their assigned paths, so that sometimes the shining moon is in full of the light of her brother sun and hides the lesser stars, sometimes the nearer sun she wanes and loses her glory. You ordain that Hesperus, after rising at nightfall to drive the cold stars before him, should change his role and, as Lucifer, grow pale before the rising sun. When the cold of winter makes trees bare, you shorten the day to a briefer span. But when warm summer comes, you make the night hours go swiftly. Your power governs the changing year. In spring, Zephyrus renews the delicate leaves that Boreas, the wind of winter, had destroyed, and Sirius burns the high corn in autumn that Arcturus had seen in seed. Nothing escapes your ancient law. Nothing can avoid the work of its proper station. You govern all things, each according to its destined purpose. Human acts alone, O ruler of all, you refuse to restrain within just bounds. Why should uncertain fortune control our lives? Harsh punishment, deserved by the criminal, afflicts the innocent, Immoral scoundrels now occupy positions of power and unjustly trample the rights of good men. Virtue, which ought to shine forth, is covered up and hides in darkness, while good men must suffer for the crimes of the wicked. Perjury and deceit are not held blameworthy as long as they are covered by the color of lies. When these scoundrels choose to use their power, they can intimidate even powerful kings, because the masses fear them. O God, whoever you are, wherever you are, who joins all things in perfect harmony, look down upon this miserable earth. We men are no small part of your great work, yet we wallow here in the stormy sea of fortune. Ruler of all things, calm the roiling waves, and, as you rule the immense heavens, rule also the earth in a stable concord. Pause. And for anyone who's trying to read along or find this edition, I don't think you will be able to find this particular version digitized. However, I know for a fact there's a version on Gutenberg. So if you're trying to follow along that way, or if you're just listening, whatever you choose to do, that will be where you can find a copy. Okay. Wow. Just, I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. Taking this as a moment to just kind of catch my breath and say that honestly I picked the Consolation of Philosophy for the first stream on a bit of a lark, because it's so underground, but also because of the prose is so gorgeous and so compelling. But I didn't quite consider the context of reading this appeal to wisdom, this appeal to the precarious balance of good and evil, and how we measure philosophy as a force of mediation, of tempering our own wisdom to understand these things. And I think, in retrospect, wow, what a perfect choice. Oh, and I picked this up in a used bookshop, and so whoever had this copy before me, his or hers, forgive me, notations are absolutely hilarious. It's just everything is underlined and then just question marks everywhere. Relatable. And Jesse, yes, it's being recorded. Any type of live stream will be saved as a video to the group. So anyone on a different time zone, if we decide to keep it at 8 p.m. EST, we'll be able to catch up at a later date. So you will be able to tune in whenever you're free. Okay. And just one more. Wow. Medieval humanism is definitely a Belgian white type of thing. And Louise, that's what I figured. It's based on a pretty obscure version of the Consolation, and this one is done with more. Okay, so I'm reading the foreword by Richard Green now. He chose to go as literally as possible versus trying to preserve the metric of the poetry portions of this. In addition, this decision was influenced by my concern to preserve for the student of late medieval literature the figures and metaphors of this very influential book. I hope that what they gained in fidelity to the historical language of the metrical passages will compensate for the loss of poetic reach and elegance which a good verse translation can provide. Yeah, so this is definitely, he also did this in, yeah, he's a freak. Richard Green, from what I've gathered in my readings, is he's a bit out there. But he really, the reason I picked this one versus going for the Gutenberg one is that he goes he goes hard in trying to keep to the spirit of the text, even if it's not quite the he stays as literally as possible close to the spirit of the text in his translation, versus trying to preserve as we would contemporarily approach it as an art. Yeah, so sorry for using a very out of print version of the Consolation. Okay. Prose 5, Book 1. Philosophy suggests that the source of the prisoner's trouble is within himself and begins to reassure him. While I poured out my long, sad story, poor guy, Philosophy looked on amiably, quite undismayed by my complaints. Then she said, "When I first saw you downcast and crying, I knew you were in misery and exile, but without your story I would not have known how desperate your exile is. You have not been driven out of your homeland, you have willfully wandered away. Or if you prefer to think that you have been driven into exile, you yourself have done the driving, since no one else could do it. For if you can remember your true country, you know that it is not, as Athens once was, ruled by many persons. Rather, it has one ruler and one king who rejoices in the presence of citizens, not in their expulsion. To be governed by his power and subject to his laws is the greatest liberty. Surely you know that the oldest law of your true city, that the citizen who has chosen to establish his home there has a sacred right to not be driven away. The man who lives within the walls of that city need not fear banishment, but if he loses his desire to live there, he also loses the assurance of safety. And so I am not so disturbed. And so I am not so much disturbed by this prison as by your attitude. Damn! I do not need your library with its glass walls and ivory decoration, but I do need my place in your mind. For there I have placed not books, but that which gives value to books, the ideas of which are found in my writings. What you have said about your merits in the Commonwealth is true. Your many services deserve even more than of what you claim. And what you have said about the truth or falsity of the accusations against you is well known to everyone. You were right to speak sparingly of the crimes and deceit of your enemies. Such things are better talked about by the man in the street who hears about them. You have sharply protested the injustice done to you by the Senate. You have expressed sorrow for the accusations against me and the weakening of my place in the public esteem. Finally, you have protested against fortune and sorrow and anger, and complained that rewards are not distributed equally on the grounds of merit. At the end of your bitter poem, you expressed the hope that the same peace which rules the heavens might also rule the earth. But because you are so upset by sorrow and anger and so blown about by the tumult of your own feelings, you are not now in the right frame of mind to take my strong medicine. For the time being, then, I shall use a more gentle treatment, so that your hardened and excited condition may be softened by gentle handling and thus prepared for more potent remedies. Yeah. Poem 6, Book 1. And just a funny little scrawl from whoever owned this copy previously. It literally just says, "We'll do what you can." Oh, I like that. Okay. The fool who plants his seed in the hard ground when summer burns with the sun's heat must feed on acorns in the fall, because his hope of harvest is in vain. Do not look for violets in purple meadows when fields are blasted by winter winds, and do not cut your vine branches in the spring if you want to enjoy the grapes, for Bacchus brings his fruit in autumn. God assigns to every season its proper office, and he does not permit the condition he has set to be altered. Every violent effort to upset his established order will fail in the end. Yoicks. Prose 6, Book 1. Philosophy begins to remind Boethius of certain basic truths which will place his misfortunes in proper perspective. I love this. I love this part. First, philosophy said, will you let me test your present attitude with a few questions so that I can decide on a way to cure you? Ask whatever you like, I replied, and I will try to answer. Do you think, she began, that this world is subject to random chance, or do you believe that it is governed by some rational principle? I cannot suppose that its regular operation can be the result of mere chance. Indeed, I know that God the Creator governs his work, and the day will never come when I can be shaken from the truth of this judgment. That is true, philosophy answered. You said as much in your poem a while ago when you deplored the fact that only men were outside of God's care. You did not doubt that all other things were ruled by reason. Strange, isn't it, that one who has so healthy an attitude should be so sick with despair? We must search further, because obviously something is missing. Tell me, since you have no doubt that the world is ruled by God, do you know how it is governed? I don't quite get the point of your question, so I am unable to answer. You see, I was right in thinking that you had some weakness, like a breach in the wall of a fort, through which the sickness of anxiety has found its way into your soul. But tell me, do you remember what at the end or goal of all things is, the goal toward which all of nature is directed? Oh, I have a bit of a cold, I'm sorry. I heard it once, I answered, but grief has dulled my memory. Well, do you know where all things come from? I answered that I knew all things came from God. How, then, is it possible that you can know the origin of all things and still be ignorant of their purpose? But this is the usual result of anxiety. It can change a man, but it cannot break and it cannot destroy him. I want you to answer this too, I said. Do you remember? I want you to answer this too, she said. Do you remember that you are a man? It's a biped. How could I forget that? I answer. Well then, what is a man? Can you give me a definition? Do you mean that I am a rational animal and mortal? I know that, and I admit that I am such a creature. Do you know nothing else about what you are? No, nothing. Now I know another cause of your sickness, and the most important. You have forgotten what you are. And so I am fully aware of the reason for your sickness and the remedy, too, for it. You are confused because you have forgotten what you are, and therefore you are upset because you are in exile and stripped of all your possessions, because you are ignorant of the purpose of things. You think that stupid and evil men are powerful and happy, And because you have forgotten how the world is governed, you suppose that these changes of your fortune came about without purpose. Such notions are enough to cause not only sickness but death. But be grateful to the giver of health that nature has not entirely forsaken you. For you have the best medicine for your health in your grasp of the truth about the way the world is governed. You believe that the world is not subject to the accidents of chance, but to divine reason. Therefore, you have nothing to fear. From this tiny spark, the living fire can be rekindled. But the time has not yet come for stronger remedies. It is the nature of men's minds that when they know to throw away the truth, they also then embrace false ideas, and from these comes the cloud of anxiety which obscures their vision of the truth. I shall try to dispel this cloud by gentle treatment, so that when the darkness of this deceptive feeling is removed, you may recognize the splendor of true light. Poem 7, Book 1. Stars hidden by black cloud. I'm sorry. Stars hidden by black clouds send down no light. If the wild south wind churns up the sea, the waves which were once clear as glass, as clear as the bright day, seem muddy and filthy to the beholder. The following stream, tumbling down from the high mountain, is often blocked by the stone broken off from the rocky cliff. So it is with you. If you want to see the truth in clear light and follow the right road, you must cast off both all joy and all fear. Fly from hope and sorrow. When these things rule, the mind is clouded and bound to the earth. Okay, so that's book 1. I am going to take a couple-minute break. Couple. I have a piece I have a piece of frozen pizza that's calling out my name, and then I will be right back. And I think it's also time for some Miles Davis. Okay. And so looking at this, all right. I'm going to do halfway through book 2 because book 2 is 50 pages. All right. And let me know if I need to turn down my music. Just feeling kind of jazzy. Prose 1, Book 2. Philosophy reminds Boethius of the nature and habits of the goddess Fortune. Philosophy was silent for a while, Then, regaining my attention by her modest reserve, she said, "If I understand the causes of your diseased condition, you are suffering from the absence of your former good fortune. What you regard as a change has greatly upset you. I am well acquainted with the many deceptions of that monster fortune." Me too. "She pretends to be friendly to those she intends to cheat, and disappoints those she unexpectedly leaves with intolerable sorrow. If you will recall her nature and habits, you will be convinced that you had nothing of much value when she was with you, and have not lost anything now that she's gone. But I do not suppose that I have to labor this point with you. Have to labor this point with you." I'm gonna turn it down. I put on some Brahms instead. Okay. "When fortune smiled upon you, you manfully scorned her and attacked her with principles drawn from my deepest wisdom. With every sudden change of fortune brings with it a certain disquiet in the soul, and this is what has caused you to lose your peace of mind. Now is the time for you to take some gentle and pleasant remedy which may prepare you for stronger medicine. I shall use the sweet persuasion of rhetoric, which is suitable enough if it does not contradict the truths of philosophy. I shall add the grace of music, a servant of mine whose songs are sometimes happy and sometimes sad. What is it, my friend, that has thrown you into grief and sorrow? Do you think that you have encountered something new and different? You are wrong if you think that fortune has changed towards you. This is her nature, the way she always behaves. She is changeable, and so in her relations with you, she has merely done what she has always done. This is the way she was when she flattered you and led you on with the pleasures of false happiness. You have merely discovered the two-faced nature of this blind goddess. Although she still hides herself from others, she is now wholly known to you. If you like her, abide by her conditions and do not complain. But if you hate her treachery, ignore her and her deceitful antics. Really, the misfortunes which are now such a cause of grief ought to be reasons for tranquility. For now she has deserted you, and no man can ever be secure until he has been forsaken by fortune. Do you think that your lost happiness is a precious thing? Can present good fortune be dear to you, even though you know you may lose it, and that the loss will bring sorrow? If you cannot keep her, and if it makes you miserable to lose her, what is fickle fortune but the promise of future distress? Is it not enough to see what is present before our eyes? Prudence demands that we look toward to the future. The double certainty of loss and consequent misery should prevent both the fear of her threats and the desire of her favors. Finally, once you have submitted yourself to her chains, you ought to take calmly whatever she can do to you. If you were to wish for a law to control the comings and goings of one whom you have freely taken for your mistress, you would be unjust, and your impatience would merely aggravate a condition which you cannot change. If you hoist your sails in the wind, you will go where the wind blows you, not where you choose to go. If you put seeds in the ground, you must be prepared for lean as well as abundant years. You have put yourself in fortune's power. Now you must be content in the ways of your mistress. If you try to stop the force of her turning wheel, you are the most foolish man alive. If it should stop turning, it would cease to be fortune's wheel. Poem 1, Book 2. When fortune turns her wheel with her proud right hand, she is as unpredictable as the flooding Euripus. I'm sorry. At one moment she fiercely tears down mighty kings, at the next the hypocrite exalts the humbled captive. She neither hears nor cares about the tears of those in misery. With a hard heart she laughs at the pain she causes. This is the way she amuses herself, this is the way she shows her power. She shows her servants the marvel of a man despairing and happy within a single hour. Prose 2, Book 2. Philosophy shows that this is the nature of fortune to change. Let me confront you with the arguments of fortune herself, then you will see that she is right. She might say to you, why do you bother with me in your daily complaints? What have I taken from you that belonged to you? You may argue your case against me before any judge, and if you can prove that riches and honors really belong to any mortal man, I will freely concede your ownership of the things that you ask for. When nature produced you from your mother's womb, I found you naked and lacking in everything. I nourished you with my abundant gifts, and being inclined to favor you, an attitude which you now seem to hold against me, I endowed you with all of the affluence and distinction in my power. Now it pleases me to withdraw my favor. You should be grateful for the use of things which belong to someone else. You have no legitimate cause for your complaint, as though you had lost something which was your own. Why then are you so sad? I have done you no injury. Riches, honors, and all good fortune belong to me. They betray me as servants and obey me as their mistress. They come to me, and when I go, they go too. I would even say that if the things of which you complain about losing had really been yours, you would never have lost them. Why then should I alone be deprived of my rights? The heavens are permitted to grant their bright days and blot them out with dark nights. The year may decorate the face of the earth with fruits and flowers, and then again make it barren with clouds and frost. The sea is allowed to invite the sailor with fair weather, and then terrify him with storms. Shall I then permit man's insatiable cupidity to tie me down to a sameness alien to my habits? Here is the source of my power, the game I always play. I spin my wheel and find pleasure in raising the low to a high place and lowering those who are on top. Go up if you like, but only on the condition that you will not feel abused when my sport requires your fall. Didn't you know about my habits? Surely you had known of Croesus, king of Lydia, who was a formidable adversary to Cyrus at one time and later suffered such reverses they would have been burnt had he not been saved by a shower from the heavens. And you must have heard of how Paulus wept over the calamities suffered by Perses, king of Macedonia, whom he captured. What else does the cry of tragedy bewail but the overthrow of happy realms by the unexpected blow of fortune? You must have learned as a boy that on Jupiter's doorstep there are two barrels, one holding good things, the other bad. What if you had drawn more abundantly from the barrel of good things? What if I have not deserted you completely? What if my very mutability gives you reason to hope that your fortunes will improve? In any case, do not lose heart. You live in a world in which all men share, so you ought not to desire to live by some special law. Oof. Poem 2, Book 2. If free-handed plenty should dispense riches from her cornucopias plentiful as the sands cast up by the storm-tossed sea, or as the stars that shine in heaven on clear nights, men still would not be able to stop crying at their miserable complaints. Even though God were overgenerous with treasures of gold and deigned to satisfy every plea, if he favored the ambitious with the greatest honors, still All this would not satisfy. Ravenous greed would devour everything and then discover other wants. No bridle can restrain man's disordered desires within a reasonable bound. Even when he is filled with great favors, he burns with thirst for more. No man can be rich who cries fearfully and then considers himself to be poor. Prose 3, Book 2. Philosophy reminds the prisoner of his former prosperity and of the precious gifts he still has. And that's how you pronounce it, by the way. It's gif. If fortune should argue her case in this way, you would be unable to answer her. But if you do have something to say in support of your complaint, I will be glad to listen. You have made a persuasive argument, I replied, and presented it with sweet music and rhetoric, but it satisfies only while it is being spoken. Those in misery have a more profound awareness of their afflictions, and therefore a deep-seated pain that continues long after the music stops. You are quite right, philosophy answered, for these words are not supposed to cure your disease, but only to kill the pain of your obstinate sorrow. And at the proper time I shall apply a more deeply penetrating medicine. Still, you ought not to consider yourself completely miserable if you recall your many great joys. I will not mention that when you lost your father, you were adopted by a very prominent people and were chosen to become closely associated with the most powerful figures in the city. You soon were more dear to them by love than you had been close before by relationship, and that is the most precious bond. Everyone considered you most fortunate to have so noble a father-in-law, such a chaste wife, and such fine sons. I pass over such trivial things as the fact that in your youth you received honors which most men never achieve, even in old age. But I want to stress the greatest of your joys. If any mortal achievement can make a man happy, it is possible that any amount of misfortune can dim the memory of that brilliant occasion when you saw your 2 sons made consuls and carried from their house in the company of senators and acclaimed by the people. They sat in the Senate in the chairs of consulship, while you made a speech in honor of the king, which earned high praise for its wit and elegance. You stood between your 2 honored sons and surpassed the expectations of the great crowd with your triumphant generosity. You pledged yourself to fortune while she pampered you and favored you with her gifts. You got more from her than any private citizen ever received, and now do you think you are in a place to bargain with her? This is the first time she's ever frowned upon you with her evil eye. You balance the number and kinds of your joys and misfortunes, you must admit that up to now you have been a happy man. You think yourself unfortunate because you have been now lost the things which seemed to make you happy before. Still, you should not make yourself miserable because this sorrow will also pass. Do you imagine that you have just come on the stage of life as an unexpected pilgrim? Surely you do not expect to find stability in human affairs, since the life of man himself is often quickly ended. Although it is true that things which are subject to fortune can hardly be counted on, nevertheless, the last day of a man's life is the kind of death to which such fortune as he still has. What difference does it make then whether you desert her by dying, or she you by leaving? Poem 3, Book 2. When Apollo in his rosy cart begins to spread across the sky, the stars grow pale and fade before the rushing flame. When the warm west wind blows, the woodland is radiant with spring roses, but the rage of the cold east wind can blast their beauty and leave only thorns. The calm sea often gleams in serene stillness, but often too angry storms out of the north can throw up huge waves. If the form of this world cannot stay the same, but suffers so many violent changes, What folly it is to trust man's tumbling fortunes, to rely on things that come and go. One thing is certain, fixed by eternal law: nothing that is born can last. Hi, Pedro. Sorry, my throat's gonna be a bit dry. Probably shouldn't be lubricating it with a Belgian white. Can I just say how classy I feel right now? I have Brahms for violin going in the background. I'm reading philosophy to a bunch of philosophy people. This is a dream only men can dream of. Prose for Book 2. Boethius protests that the worst sorrow is the remembrance of lost joys. Philosophy answers that the only true joy is self-possession in the face of adversity. Then I answered, everything you say is true, dear nurse of all virtues. I do not deny that I came quickly to great prosperity. The memory of it is what caused me the most pain. For in the midst of adversity, the worst misfortune of all is to have once been happy. You are being punished for having misjudged your situation, philosophy answered. Therefore, you have no right to blame the things which bother you. But if you are so impressed by this rather silly notion of happiness based on good fortune, let us consider how well off you are. Then, if you find that among all of the gifts of fortune, your most precious possessions are still safely yours thanks to God's providence, how can you justly complain of misfortune? Your father-in-law, Symmachus, one of the finest men who ever lived, and for one of whom you would most gladly have given your life, is still unharmed. That most wise and virtuous man lives in safety to lament the injuries of which you are suffering. Your wife, so gracious, so chaste, so like her father in excellence of character, still lives, though now she is weary of life and goes on only for your sake. Yikes. Even I must concede that in her case your happiness is greatly marred, since her sorrow of your misfortunes is killing her. Think of your sons, the consuls, who already at their age show the character of their father and grandfather. You are a happy man if you consider what you still have. The greatest concern of mortals is to preserve life, and you still possess things which everyone agrees are dearer than life itself. So, dry your tears. Fortune has not yet done her worst to you. You have not become a derelict in the storm, since those anchors of present comfort and future still hope to hold fast. And I pray that they continue to hold, I said, for as long as they do, I shall not go down, no matter how bad things get. Still, you see yourself how much I have lost. We have made some progress anyway, she answered, if you had found something to be happy about. But I find your self-pity hard to bear when you moan childishly over the loss of even some of your happiness. No one is so completely happy that he does not have to endure some loss. Anxiety is the necessary condition of human happiness, since happiness is never completely achieved and never permanently kept. The man who enjoys great wealth may be scorned for his low birth. The man who is honored for his noble family may be oppressed by such poverty that he would rather be unknown. Someone else may enjoy both wealth and social position, but be miserable because he is not married. Mood. Still, another may be happily married, but have no children to inherit his fortune. Others have children only to be saddened by their vices. Therefore, no one is entirely satisfied with his lot. Each finds something lacking, or something which gives him pain. Besides, those most blessed are often the most sensitive. Unless everything works out perfectly, they are impatient at disappointment and shattered by quite trivial things. It takes very little to spoil the perfect happiness of the fortunate. Just think how many people would consider themselves lucky to have only a small part of your remaining good fortune. This very place, which you call a land of exile, is home to those who live here. Nothing is miserable unless you think it so. And on the other hand, nothing brings happiness unless you are content with it. No one is so completely happy that he would not choose to change his condition if he let himself think about it impatiently. The joy of human happiness is shot through with bitterness. No matter how pleasant it seems when one has it, such happiness cannot be kept when it decides to leave. Give me one moment. Okay. You see, then, how shoddy is the enjoyment provided by mortal things. They forsake those who are content with them, and they do not satisfy those who are discontented. Why then do men look outside themselves for happiness which is within? You are confused by error and ignorance, and so I will point out to you the source of your perfect happiness. Is anything more precious to you than yourself? You will agree that there is nothing. Then, if you possess yourself, you have something which you can never want or will give up, and something which fortune cannot take from you. If you will consider carefully the following argument, you will have to admit that happiness cannot depend on things which are uncertain. If happiness is the highest good of rational natures, and if nothing which can be lost can be a supreme good, because there's obviously less good than which cannot be lost, then clearly unstable fortune cannot pretend to bring happiness. The man who enjoys fleeting happiness either knows that it is perishable or he doesn't. If he does not know it, his condition is unhappy because it rests on blind ignorance. If he knows his happiness is perishable, he must live in fear of losing what he knows can be easily lost, and such constant fears will not let him be happy. And if he should lose it, would he think that a trivial matter? Whatever can be given up without regret is indeed a thing of little worth. Now you are a man fully convinced by many proofs that human souls are in no way mortal. It is clear, then, that if transitory happiness ends with the death of the body, and if this means the end of all happiness, the whole human race will be plunged into misery by death. But if we know that many men have sought the enjoyment of happiness not only in death, but also in the sorrows and pains of life, how can this present life make us happy when its end cannot make us unhappy? Give me one moment. Okay. I'm just going to reread that one line for you. It is clear then that if transitory happiness ends with the death of the body, and if this means an end of all happiness, the whole human race will be plunged into misery by death. But if we know that many men have sought the enjoyment of happiness not only in death, but also in the sorrows and pains of life, how can this present life make us happy when its end cannot make us unhappy? There's a lot there. It's one of the reasons I love this book so much. Poem 4, Book 2. The prudent, steady man who wants a lasting peace, immune from the blasting winds and dangerous waves, should avoid the high mountain peaks and the shore's shifting sands. For the mountain tops are lashed by terrifying gale winds, and the loose sand of the beach will not bear his weight. Leave them the dangerous places of delight, and make your home safely on the low rocks. Though the wind trouble the sea with threats of destruction, you will live a serene life, happy for having built a strong house in the quiet valley and laughing at the wrath of the elements. That's a dream. Prose 5, Book 2. Philosophy evaluates the things men strive for and concludes that material possessions bring neither true credit nor safety. Now that I think I see the soothing medicine of my discourse is taking effect, I think I may risk somewhat stronger remedies, even if the gifts of fortune were not momentary and uncertain. There is nothing about them that can ever really be made your own, and they are vile in themselves if you look at them carefully. Are riches naturally precious, or are they precious because of some virtue of yours? What is precious about them, the gold medal or the pile of money? Wealth seems better when it is spent than when it is in the bank, for avarice makes men hated, but liberality makes them popular. But that which is given away is no longer possessed, so that money is more precious when it is generously got rid of. And if all the money in the world were acquired by one man, everyone else would be penniless. The sound of a voice can be given equally to many hearers, but money cannot be distributed among many persons without impoverishing those who give it up. Riches, then, are miserable and troublesome. They cannot be fully possessed by many people, and they cannot be acquired without some loss to others. The brilliance of jewels is eye-catching, but the thing of special value is in the light of the gems rather than in the eye of the beholder. I, personally, am amazed that men prize them so highly. For what is it there about a man which lacks the life of the soul and the articulation of the body, which can rightly be thought as beautiful by humans which have living, rational natures? It is true that all things derive a certain beauty from the Creator and from their own variety, but they are too far beneath your excellence for you to marvel at them. You are, of course, delighted by the beauty of open fields, and why not, since this is a beautiful part of a beautiful creation? In the same way we are pleased by a serene sea, we admire the sky, the stars, the sun, and the moon. But do any of these things belong to you? How then can you glory in their splendor? You are not adorned with spring flowers, nor are you laden with summer fruit. When you act as though such external goods are your own, you are deluded by foolish satisfaction. Fortune can never make things yours of which nature has made foreign to you. No doubt the fruits of the earth are given to animals and men for their food, but if you simply wish to satisfy the demands of nature, there is no reason why you should struggle for the superfluities of fortune. For nature's needs are few and small. If you try to glut yourself with too many things, you will find your excesses either unpleasant or positively harmful. Or perhaps you pride yourself on fine clothing. Well, if they are handsome to look at, I would admire either the quality of the material or the skill of the tailor. Possibly you think that the large number of servants can make you happy. But if they are unreliable or dishonest, they are a pernicious influence in the house and extremely troublesome to their master. On the other hand, if they are good, how can their honesty be considered any virtue of yours? Therefore, it ought to be clear that none of these things which you are inclined to take credit for really, actually, truly belong to you. And if there is no desirable beauty in these things, why should you regret losing them, or be particularly elated to possess them? If they are beautiful by nature, what is that to you? They would be pleasing to you even if they belonged to someone else. They are not precious because you have them. You desire to have them because they seem precious. What then do you want? What then do you want from fortune in all of your strident demands? I suppose that you are trying to avoid poverty by acquiring possessions, but you will find just the opposite. You will need more in order to keep the various valuable things that you have. Those which have much need much, and on the contrary, those who limit their possessions to their natural needs rather than to their excessive ambitions, need very little. You try to satisfy your desire with external goods which are foreign to you because you have no good within you which belongs inherently to you. What an upside down state of affairs when a man who is divine by his gift of reason thinks that his excellence depends on the possession of lifeless bric-a-brac. Oh, the Romans, they loved their bric-a-brac. Other creatures are content with what they have, but you, made in the likeness of God by virtue of your reason, choose ornaments for your excellent nature from base things without understanding how great an injury you do to your Creator. God wished the human race to be superior to all earthly things, but you have lowered your dignity below the level of the most trivial things. For if it is true that the good thing in which something else finds its good is more precious than the something else which counts it as his good, then when you judge vile things to be your goods, you lower yourself beneath them by your own estimate, and so become deservedly low. For man is constituted so that when he knows himself, he excels at all other things, but when he forgets who he is, he becomes worse than the beasts. It is natural for other living things not to know who they are, but in man such ignorance is vice. Your error is painfully evident if you suppose that a man can improve himself by adding ornaments that are not his own. It cannot be done, for if a thing attracts attention by added decoration, that which is added by praise is praised, but that which is covered and disguised remains as base as before. Moreover, I deny that anything can be considered good which harms the one who has it. I'm sure you will agree, and riches are frequently harmful to those who possess them. Desperate men are greedy for things that belong to others and think that possession alone is enough to make a man worthy of riches and jewels. Now you are fearful of losing your life. But if you had walked the road of a poor pilgrim, you would laugh in the face of thieves. What a blessing worldly riches are. When you have them, you have lost your safety. And I think, okay, I'm going to go for a couple more pages. Poem 5, Book 2. Men were most happy in former ages, content with the yield of fertile fields not yet ruined by indolent luxury. Their hunger was easily satisfied by acorns. They did not know the potent mixture of wine and honey. They had not learned to color fine silk of Syria with Tyrian dye. They slept soundly on the soft grass and drank from the running streams, rested in the shade of high pines. Travelers had not yet sailed the high seas to visit foreign ports with their merchandise. Trumpets of war were silent, and blood had not with the fierce hate dyed red the glory fields. For how could hostile fury drive men to take up arms when the war offered no rewards for gaping wounds except the blood that was spilled? Would that our age could return to those ancient virtues, but now man's avarice burns more fiercely than Aetna's fires. Who was he that first dug up the buried gold, the gems that wished to remain hidden, and with them all of our costly dangers? And actually, I feel like it's a good place to stop. So that is partially through Book 2 of Boethius, The Consolation of Philosophy. If you're catching up after the fact, if you're watching this whole thing through, please let me know in the comments what you thought. If there's things you'd like me to change, if you're not feeling The Consolation of Philosophy, if you'd like me to go ahead and skip to the St. Augustine's Confessions, let me know. if you have, I don't know. I don't even know what I could give you that you would want. But I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this, and I enjoyed it too. I can't wait to do this on a weekly basis for those that actually want to keep up with it. Cheers.